Hello, my friends. It has been a while. You probably thought I died. I did not. Let's go through everything I read this month. We're going to go through every book I read in October. There are 23 books, my guys. 23. I also DNF'd 2 books, so I'm going to start with those books just to get them out of the way, talk a little bit of shit, and then we'll move into all the books I finished, which ones I'm going to end up donating to a secondhand store. We'll get into it. So let's start with my DNFs. The first book I have is Too Scared to Sleep. This book is a horror short story collection. It kind of blew up on TikTok for a while there because at the end of each short story there's a QR code. You scan the QR code and it takes you to like a 10-second clip to kind of bring to life the stories. I had a lot of issues with this collection. The first one being that the videos that are associated with each story are definitely just AI. Some of them looked so trash, some of them were glitchy, some of them had nothing to do with the story. Like sometimes they weren't related at all. The stories were way too short, went for cheap thrills. I got bored. I think I got about halfway through before I decided this is not for me. And I don't even have it to show you because I've already taken it back to a charity shop. So grand. I also DNF'd The Vampire in the Bookstore. Bing! I also owned a paperback of this, but again, it was so bad that after like 30 pages, I stopped reading and I donated it. This one follows a woman. She really loves books. She's a book restorer, and her favorite author happens to live in the same town as her, so she like coordinates an accidental run-in with him. Turns out he is not only her favorite author, he's also a vampire, and that is like right up my alley. Books, vampire, meeting your favorite author, everything that I thought was going to be perfect. But within 30 pages I just couldn't stand it anymore. He was so like, he had a 5-minute conversation with this woman in a bookstore and he's like, I've never met anyone like her in all of my centuries of being alive. She's the one. I would never harm her. She smells so sweet. And I'm like, you've known each other for about 5 minutes.
Know her? I hardly know her.
I was considering just skimming the book to see if it got any better. And then I realized, why would I do that? I'm not enjoying myself. So I DNF'd it. I unhauled it. Glad I stopped when I did because I can just tell it would have been a bad time for me. Now let's get into the books I read, I finished, and haven't unhauled just yet. So I will preface this by saying I started on October 1st with 12 books on my TBR for the month, not including the DNFs. I ended up reading 23. So as I got to the end of my TBR, I would add 2 more books. And once I finished those, I would add a few more books. So the TBR grew exponentially from 12 to 23. I guess I was just feeling the books, I was feeling the vibes this month. So let's start off with my first read of the month. It'd be really good if I could pick it up. The Boyfriend by Freida McFadden. This came out the 1st or 2nd day of October in Australia. This was actually Bestie Sarah's pick for our monthly book club that I have with me and my 2 girlies. And I really enjoyed this. This follows a woman. Her name is Sydney. She's trying to date in New York City, but she keeps meeting creeps and she keeps meeting guys that she's just not vibing with. And after a really bad date, she meets this guy and he's a doctor and he seems perfect. But we also get his perspective from his childhood when he was basically accused of murdering a girl in his high school. And this was fun. It was very Frida. It was fun. It was quick. I didn't have to overthink it. And I enjoyed it greatly. I think on Goodreads I gave it a 5-star. I don't know if it deserves a 5-star. That was just, as soon as I finished reading it, that was the vibe. But I'm going to definitely keep this book. The next 3 books I read are all part of a series, and they're all quite short books. I told my friends after I read the first one, and they were definitely judging me, but I already owned books 2 and 3, so I had to read them all. So this series is called The Leviathan Fitness Series by Ashley Bennett. The first book is called Muscles and Monsters. It follows this girl here. She owns a bakery, and this wolfman here who owns a gym. They have a little meet cute outside one day on the street, and she kind of wants to get into working out. She wants to get into shape, and he really likes her cupcakes, and he's like, hey, how about I let you come to the gym, I'll train you, and in exchange you give me cupcakes. Now this entire book is set in a town that I don't remember the name of. Oh, this is all set in a town called Bright Glen. In this world humans coexist with supernatural creatures. Like, there's a bunch of supernatural creatures living in this town, and for the most part, humans are like vibing with it. Humans are so cool. Some are still like racist. Is that speciesist? I guess. But our main character here, Tegan, is very open to all sorts of people. So she starts dating Wolfman Atlas. It gets very smutty. I didn't super enjoy this one. I gave it like a 3-star. Like, it was fine. But I was pretty sure I was going to unhaul it, right? So then I read the second book, Tentacles and Triathlons, which follows Tegan's human brother, Reese, and a kraken named Cyrus. And I don't really remember how the situation arises, but Tegan is trying to get Reese to be more inclusive of supernatural creatures, and Cyrus, the kraken, decides to help Reese train for a triathlon. I love this story so much more than the first. It's only the slightest bit longer, but there seemed to be a bit more depth in their relationship. It wasn't just lust. It actually seemed like they talked about their lives and their pasts and their traumas, and I really enjoyed this book so much more. So after reading this one, I'm thinking, shit, I'm gonna have to keep the entire series now. And then I read the last book in the series. So far, there is a 4th book coming out next year. This is Mantras and Minotaurs. This follows Tegan and Reese's mum, Pam, and a Minotaur named Alistair. And Alistair is the parent of one of the people that works at the gym that Atlas owns. So it's all interconnected. It's all weaving together. And I really, really enjoyed this as well. This was a cutesy, like, it was smutty, there was smut, there is in every romance book these days, but this one was nice because Pam is like in her 40s, almost 50, and it was just a nice, like, older person having a second chance at love, and I really appreciated that. I'm only 28, but all of the romance books, again, are like between, you know, like 22 and 30, and it was just nice to have a romance with an older character. Not old, but older, you know what I mean? And they basically start like a long distance relationship, and I enjoyed it. It was nice, it was fine, it was fun. So I think I'm gonna keep all 3 books for now. I also know myself, and when I go through the massive unhauls where I just start ripping stuff off my shelves, that series is definitely gonna be one of the series that I end up ripping off my shelf and donating, but it's gonna stay for now. I say hesitantly, with a question mark at the end of my sentence. So after that, I'm like, I've read 3 romances, let's switch it up a little bit, and I decided to read Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen. I had such high expectations for this book. It is basically set on a show, let's just call it The Bachelor, because that's basically what it is, and we are following the last 4 women in The Bachelor. And the 4 women and The Bachelor, and obviously the production team, decide to go to this island for like a semi-final getaway. And things are weird on the island. Things are weird. Crew members are seeing large figures running across the street. Things are going missing. People are getting attacked. And I did not enjoy this book whatsoever. I think this book needed to either be longer or be shorter. It's sitting at an awkward length where it's like, if it was a little bit shorter, it could probably get away with the lack of explanation. If it was longer, it could really delve into how everything in this book came to be. But at the length it's sitting at, which is like just over 200 pages, it was not great, guys. And it very much reminded me of Barbarian. I think it came out in 2022. It gave me the vibes of Barbarian by the end. But it was massively disappointing. Like, look at the cover, right? There's little blood spatters. I was excited. I wouldn't even call this a horror. I wouldn't call it a thriller. I would call it a drama with a little bit of violence. You know what I mean? So that is going to be unhauled. Didn't enjoy it. Sorry, Patricia. Next, we have got Haunt Sweet Home. This book I was so keen to buy. I had it on my wish list on Amazon, wanted to buy it, and then it ended up in a library, one of my library apps. I ended up seeing it in one of the library apps that I have, and I was like, cool, I don't have to pay for it. Let's go, boys. This follows a woman, can't remember her name. Our FMC is kind of directionless, kind of aimless, and her cousin is the producer on a crossover between a ghost hunting show and a renovation show. So the crew go to houses that people have just moved into to start the renovation process, but also to find out if there's any ghosts in the building. And our FMC's cousin is like, hey, you can be a production assistant, like come be a PA. She starts working, she ends up on night shifts, and things happen. And again, I was just so disappointed in this book. I think it might have been because it was too short. It might have been because even when like a scary scene was happening, when like ghosts were active and things were getting done, I didn't care. I was very much like, okay, we're just going through the motions. And I didn't really enjoy it. I do think it gave me vibes of maybe like American Horror Story Roanoke. Is kind of the vibe I got a little bit. It doesn't make sense to it probably won't make sense to most people, but that's the like other media I associated with it. And let's be honest, I hated American Horror Story Roanoke, so I definitely didn't like Haunt Sweet Home. So if I did have it, it would be on hold, but because I don't have it, I'm just glad I didn't spend money on it. Next, we have got The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This was one of my goals for this October. I wanted to read another Grady Hendrix book. I like Grady Hendrix as an author, but his books always just kind of seem to get pushed to the background. This follows a woman named Lynette, and Lynette is part of a support group. There's 5 or 6 girls or women that meet up monthly because they were all the final girls in different massacres. What I loved about this book is that each woman and her massacre is directly correlated to a slasher movie that we all know and love. So Lynette's, I even wrote little notes so I would remember which woman is associated with which horror movie. So Lynette's horror movie was Silent Night. I think I haven't seen Silent Night, so some of the movies were kind of hard for me to link to a character, but from what I've seen online, Lynette's massacre was Silent Night. I don't want to like ruin the rest of it because part of the fun of reading the book for me was working out which slasher movie related to which final girl. Basically, these women are like, some of them have completely moved past their trauma, others are completely stuck in it like Lynette. She's paranoid, she's always looking over her shoulder, she's always got an escape plan ready to go, and they're all at a final girl support group meeting, and one of the women ends up dead. And all the women in the support group are like, wow, that's so unfortunate. But Lynette's like, that's not unfortunate. If she's being killed, the rest of us are going to be killed. Someone is hunting us down. And they all laugh it off like, Lynette, you're too paranoid. Like, this is why we want to stop the support group. Like, you're not getting any better. But then Lynette gets attacked in her house. And everyone's like, oh my god, it was a drive-by shooting. That's crazy. And Lynette's like, no. We're still being hunted down. And let's just say it's very reminiscent of the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Very much like our main character is so convinced of something and is trying to convince everyone to be on her side, and no one is believing her. So in that sense, very reminiscent of other Grady Hendrix books, but I really enjoyed this. It was a little bit slow in the middle chunk, but like the first 30% and the last 30% I really enjoyed. So I gave it like a 4-star. I'm gonna keep it. It was fun. I think if you like slasher movies and you resonate with the final girl trope like I do, I would love to be a final girl. Well, I wouldn't. If I was going to be in a horror movie situation, I would prefer to be the final girl than a victim. All that is to say, I enjoyed it, and I think a lot of people will as well if you can get past some of the pacing issues in the middle of the book. I need to stop reading so much. The next book I read was Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay. This, like Haunt Sweet Home, was on my Amazon wishlist. I found that my library had the audiobook, which is weird because the paperback wasn't released in Australia yet, but the audiobook was. I don't understand it. I didn't enjoy it, and I'm starting to think that the Paul Tremblay books I have enjoyed have been their outliers, and generally speaking, I don't enjoy this man's work. This follows a MMC. When he was in high school, he and a group of his friends decided they were going to film a horror movie, and in the horror movie, our MMC kind of plays the victim that ends up turning into a villain. Let's try and keep it like a little bit simple. Despite the movie never being released due to incidents that occurred on set, it becomes like a cult classic. A couple of clips get released, a couple of pictures get released, and it sort of circulates online, and it grows this massive fan base of people that want to see the original cut. A production company approaches our MMC and is like, hey, we actually want to remake the movie. Like, you've got a script, and like, we've seen the script online, we've seen a couple of shots online, we'd really like to recreate this movie for the modern fan base. And he decides that he's going to oversee the production team remake this horror movie. I was down with the concept. I really enjoyed the scenes of them in high school filming this movie. So we have a dual POV, obviously MMC in the past, MMC in the present, and we've also got snippets of the script as we go through. I really enjoyed the scenes with the scripts, like going through the script, seeing how they're filming it. I enjoyed MMC in the past as a high school student, kind of becoming way too invested in his character in this movie. I did not care for the present point of view at all. It was boring, and the ending just frustrated me. And I see people in reviews that gave it 5 stars saying, obviously it was going to end that way, like there's no other way the book would have ended. Sure, I still didn't enjoy it. And again, I'm so glad I didn't spend money on this, because if I had spent money on this book, I would have been unhauling it and I would have been sad about my wasted money. So horror movie, I'm giving it like a 2-star. Like, it was slightly below average for me. Like, it started good, I was vibing with it, and then it just fucking destroyed itself for me by the end. I'm glad I didn't spend money on it. I would not recommend it. I think people that are giving it 5 stars are too easily pleased. Like, I'm just gonna throw it out there. Like, set your standards a little bit higher. My top is so dirty. I don't know. It's just cat fur. We're fine. We're fine. So the next book, yet again, was a book that was on my Amazon wish list, okay? I was excited for this book. Look at the cover. She is stunning. It is, in fact, We Came to Welcome You. So we follow a lesbian couple. We have a Dominican FMC and her wife, who is Korean. They move into this gated community straight away, culty vibes, very obsessed with keeping everything in this suburb looking the same. So like, most of the houses are identical, and all the people speak with a very similar cadence, and they're all very over the top friendly, and they're all very welcoming, and it sounds great, doesn't it? But very quickly our FMC is like, I don't trust these white people. There's too many white people in this town. I don't trust them. And things start going weird. She thinks that she sees things in the house, and she starts hearing voices in her head. And again, I was here for it. I was interested. It was very hive mind. It was very outsider in a perfect community where nothing is perfect. I was very interested. And then I finished the book, and I was actually angry at the ending of this one, because it completely eradicated everything the book had been about. I didn't like it. I'm not going to spoil it. You know what? I am going to spoil it. Spoilers for the next, call it 30 seconds. The entire book, the FMC is fighting against these people. She doesn't want to conform. She doesn't want to be one of them. She is an individual. She doesn't want to join this collective hive mind. She wants to get her and her wife out of this fucking town. And in the last chapter, she joins the Homeowners Association. She becomes the president, and she decides that she wants to help spread the hive mind throughout the rest of the world. You just spent 300 pages trying to do the exact opposite, and your motivations did a full 180 within a chapter. That's all I'm going to say. That really annoyed me. I'm sure if I was a smarter person, I would read into it and read into the symbolism and why she made that decision. It didn't make sense to me. It felt like the author got to the 300 page mark and thought, shit, how am I going to end this book? I haven't set up any conceivable way for this character to get out of this alive, so I guess I'm just going to have to fling some shit at the wall, see what sticks. I didn't enjoy it. It pissed me off. Luckily, I really enjoyed the next book. So as you can tell, at this point, October was not a good month for me. I don't think I had a single 5-star read at this point. I had The Boyfriend that I liked, and the Final Girl Support Group, which I liked, but I also read a lot of things that I fucking hated. And then I read If You Tell by Greg Olson. This book fucked me up. This is a crime nonfiction. I actually saw Danielle Christie, I think ages ago, maybe a year or two, filmed a video about the woman that this book follows. And she probably mentioned the book in her video, and that's probably what got me to buy the book. So, without, again, spoiling too much, this follows the Shelley Notick case. all I'm going to say is we follow this woman, Shelley, who is an absolute trash, flaming pile of garbage human being, who has 3 daughters, an adopted son, and basically makes their lives hell. Makes their lives absolutely miserable. Is super abusive not only to her children, but to her friends that come and stay with her, and her husband. And this book, I was engaged the entire time. I flew through this book. I don't want to use the word enjoyed, because that's got a weird connotation when it comes to true crime, but I did enjoy this book. Like I said, got through it so quickly, was invested, was constantly engaged, but by the end it just made me sad. So keep that in mind. It's a really interesting book. It's really well written. I think it's put together very clearly in a very clear timeline. There's not a lot of jumping around, but by the end I was just a little bit sad, because murder is sad. Next, I read a short story collection. Now, technically, I think I started this book back in September. It is Shit Cassandra Saw by Gwen E. Kirby. I read this short story collection a year or 2 ago. Usually in short story collections, I literally go to the contents page and I star rate every story as I read through them. And I picked up this book, Shit Cassandra Saw, and I was like, I know I read it, but I don't remember any short stories from it. Like, nothing comes to mind. So I opened the contents page and realized I didn't star rate any of the short stories when I read it the first time. I had no concept of what stories I enjoyed in this collection and what stories I disliked in this collection. So I thought, shit, I'm gonna have to reread it, which I did. And this time, look, I star rated some of the short stories. Look at me fucking go. So some standout stories. The first one, Shit Cassandra Saw That She Didn't Tell the Trojans Because at that point, fuck them anyway. Love that story. A Few Normal Things That Happen a Lot was really, really good. An Apology of Sorts to June was really good. And the last story, We Handle It, apparently. Oh, that was also a good one. For the most part, I enjoyed most of them. So overall, good collection. I'm definitely going to keep it, and I'm really glad that I reread it. This is, like, obviously, it's a very, very feminist book. I wouldn't recommend it if you hate women or you don't enjoy hearing women's perspectives on how they feel walking alone by themselves at nighttime. But I enjoyed it. And I also think the first story is so good to me because I'm into that shit. Like, I love Greek mythology. I'm interested in the Trojan War. And I've always been fascinated by Cassandra as a character within the Trojan War. So reading a story from her perspective where she is seeing everything in the future and doesn't bother telling the Trojans because A, they're not going to believe her anyway, and B, fuck them because they've treated women like shit for so long. And she compares, like, the Trojans in the Trojan War to Trojans, the condom brand, and it's just a good collection. I really enjoyed it. It is One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. This follows a bunch of couples, I think it's 5 couples, that agree to participate on a reality show where they all go to an island, and it's very partner swappy. Like, hey, you came with your boyfriend or girlfriend, but what if you leave with someone else that's more suited to you? And on the very first night there, a massive storm hits the island. The next morning, a couple of people are dead, a couple of people are severely injured. They have no communication and no means of getting off this island. So it's very much a desert island survival situation. But obviously, when you have a bunch of people on a desert island, you're gonna have a Lord of the Flies situation where people are going to break into groups, and some people are going to be leaders and some are going to be followers, and if you have 2 leaders, they're definitely going to butt heads. All that sort of stuff happens. My biggest problem with this book is that I thought there would be a plot twist. Like, I thought there would be a moment where Ruth Ware would try and shock her reader, and it didn't happen. There was no twist in this book. There's obviously a villain, and I thought that maybe the villain wasn't actually the villain and someone else is pulling the strings. No. It was a good book. Like, I enjoyed reading it, I was invested, but I was also disappointed by the end. And I think that's overall the vibe of this month. So many things to me were just a disappointment. I had such high hopes for so many of these books, and I feel like a lot of them let me down. This unfortunately was one of them. I'm going to keep it. Like, I didn't dislike it enough to unhaul it in this moment, but it definitely did disappoint me. I also am just going to throw it out there. I have seen this book compared to And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I wonder if people have read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I'm not trying to sound like an elitist, but these people are dying by natural causes. And then there were none is very much not people dying of natural causes. So I think that kind of makes the plot a bit different. So after all of that heavy stuff, I thought, time to break it up with a romance, and I decided to read My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. This follows our main character, a human named Cassie. She's desperate for a place to live, sees an ad for an apartment that's like $200 a month, ridiculously cheap, goes to move into this apartment, and then she meets Frederick. And he's a bit strange, he's a bit old-fashioned, he wears strange clothes, but he's polite, and he's like an okay roommate. He gives Cassie her space, everything is fine. So he doesn't really go out during the day, he's pretty nocturnal, and he's old-fashioned, and he doesn't understand how things in our modern society work. And obviously, like, if you can read the title, you know what the book is about. It's about a girl who moves into an apartment and it turns out her roommate is a vampire. I will explain why this is so frustrating, right? As the reader, you go into this book knowing Frederick, little guy here hanging upside down with his arms over his chest, we know he's a vampire, right? But Cassie doesn't. And it was frustrating. Sitting through, I think it was like 110 pages. We know Frederick is a vampire because we know the title of the book. Cassie doesn't know he's a vampire, and despite all of the red flags, she remains completely fucking oblivious. And it was frustrating. Like, I made this comparison to one of my friends, I think I made this comparison to Lita. When people first started reading Twilight, before it really blew up, nothing on the Twilight cover or in the blurb specifically says it is about a human and a vampire. So there's a little bit of mystery, there's a little bit of, ooh, is he? What's gonna happen when she finds out? In this, you know from the very first page. And it was very frustrating to sit through 100 pages of this stupid human woman not picking up on any of the fucking red flags. It was bizarre. But despite that, I did enjoy it. I didn't really like Frederick as a character. I don't really believe he and Cassie had the most amount of chemistry I read in a romance. But for what it was cute. I like the way she helps him try and fit in with modern society because he's been asleep for like 200 years. I feel like the stakes, no pun intended, in this book were very, very low. Spoilers alert, there's no third act breakup in this book, which I'm kind of starting to enjoy that like outside forces are what create tension in the book, not the actual couple themselves. But, again, not going to spoil it, but the ending, like the problem they have to overcome and the outcome of it, bit weird, bit campy, a bit too campy, if I'm going to be honest with you. So I was ready to unhaul this, but for reasons we'll get into later, I don't think I will just yet. But you'll have to wait and find out on the next episode of, I'm kidding, we're doing it all in one video, so sit tight, get yourself a drink. Next, I decided to pick up The X by Miss Reed McFadden. This one was a recommendation from Bestie Sarah. I think at one point we were talking about The Boyfriend by Freddie McFadden, and we were kind of comparing our favorite Freddie McFaddens versus which ones didn't hit as hard, and Sarah mentioned that she really, really enjoyed The X. Like, she didn't see some of the twists coming and she really, really enjoyed it. So I read The X, and I think to the right people, this book will be shocking. I think to Steph, who has read just too many thrillers at this point, I saw the plot twist from a mile away. I still enjoyed it. I still love this book. It was fun. It was easy to get through, like all of Frida's. It's a popcorn thriller. Good vibes. I gave it a 4 or 4.5, but I definitely saw the plot twist coming, and I don't want to be too specific, but there is a specific, the twist slash the type of twist it is, I have read in at least one other thriller, if not 2. So when it happened in this book, when I kind of realized what was going on within the first like 30 pages, I kind of knew where it was going to go. But it was still good. I still enjoyed it. It was still fun. I would still highly recommend it. But it didn't hit me as hard as it hit Sarah because I read too much. What a shocker. Moving along. It's The Family Experiment by John Mars. This book is set in a near future. A little bit dystopian. A little bit technologically advanced. This, I think, is set in the same world as like The Passengers, and The Marriage Act. I think. All sort of about, it's kind of Black Mirror-esque, if I had to describe it. This book is set in a world where VR technology is superior. And in this book, we follow a bunch of participants. I think it's 5 couples and 1 single guy who agreed to sign up for the show, where they raise a VR baby from newborn to 18 years. So every month they've gone through raising the child, it'll have like an age jump. And we follow these people raising their VR baby, and we see how they get attached to this VR child that doesn't exist. It doesn't actually exist. We see how, because it's a show, people basically have a live stream of what's happening in the VR headset. We see the public's perspective on these parents, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and how people's past decisions and past mistakes come back to haunt them in this TV show setting. It was enjoyable. I really liked it. I think I gave it a 4-star. I'm glad I read it. I'm going to keep it. I don't know if it's as strong as The One and The Passengers. It was interesting. The way some of the couples got eliminated from the show blew my mind. I got through it really, really quickly, but it kind of unraveled a little bit by the end, which is fine. Obviously, a lot of the books I've read this month unraveled at the end, so at this point I was kind of expecting it. So it didn't disappoint me as much as the others. I have owned the audiobook for this for so long, decided that this was the month to read it. It's Like a Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. This follows a street, a little neighborhood street, where in the 90s, I want to say, 11 years ago, not quite the 90s, early 2000s, I have no concept of time anymore, a woman named Shelby goes missing. She disappears. And a couple of weeks after that, a neighbor lives in the same neighborhood, a woman named Meredith and her 6-year-old daughter Delilah both go missing. So we have got Meredith's point of view from, say, March, 11 years before present day. Then we have got her neighbor across the street's point of view from May, 11 years ago. And then we've got present day chapters from the brother of the little girl who's gone missing. First of all, the intro to this book was very captivating. Chapter 1 follows Delilah in captivity, getting out of captivity. It was such a good hook to get into this book. I liked this book a lot. Like, genuinely, really, really enjoyed this book. It did make me sad though. It was just a sad book overall. And I don't want to get into the why, but it was very much, everything in this little neighborhood street is perfect on the surface, but if you dig just the tiniest bit deeper, you'll see that there are fucking problems and secrets and lies everywhere. I really enjoyed this. In hindsight, I'll have to explain why I had issues with the ending of this book, and it's nothing against this book. It's about something that happened later in the month for me. I would highly recommend this book. I'm glad that I read it. I actually was going to unhaul this at one point, so I'm glad that I read it. I'm going to keep it. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it. But we will reference this book later in the video. Next, this is a book I, again, was planning to unhaul. Decided if I didn't read it in October, I was going to unhaul it regardless, because it's just been on my shelves too long and I never look at it. I never give it a second thought. It is The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. We are following a witch named Vivian who had like a summer fling with this guy named Reese, and things end kind of badly. So she gets drunk with her cousin and they jokingly curse Reese. Oopsie daisies. And 9 years later, Reese has to come back to town because his family founded the town. So he has to come back, reload the ley lines for the town's magic. And that's when his curse comes out to play. And he finds out that Hey, Vivian, you know when you jokingly, drunkenly cursed me? You actually cursed me. Like, you probably shouldn't fuck with magic while you're drunk. And this book is about Vivian and Reese kind of working together to try and figure out how to reverse his curse, how to undo all the damage that his cursed magic is doing to the town. And while it was fun and while it was a cozy, full read, I'm not going to keep it because I'm never going to look back at it. Which could be said for a lot of the romances I've read thus far in the month. It was cute. I liked Reese as a character. I thought he was a vibe. Vivian was fine, but I didn't even enjoy it enough to consider picking up the next book in the series. So while I enjoyed it, and while I could happily give it like a 3.5 or a 4-star, I've also started to learn to accept that just because a book is a 4-star doesn't mean I need to hold on to it forever. I had my fun with this book, and now someone else can have fun with this book. So that one is getting unhauled. The next book I read. So, this book has been blowing up online. I feel like every time I see anyone on TikTok do like 5 underrated thrillers, 5 thrillers that don't get enough love, this book is always on the list. And I already owned this book, so I thought it is time for this book to shine. It is called That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. This book, okay. This book starts. We are following this teenage girl. She wakes up on the side of the road. She's injured, she's dirty, and she has no idea who she is. She gets picked up by a police officer, explains she doesn't know who she is. He takes her back to the police station, and within a couple of hours of being there, this guy runs in and he's like, "Oh my god, you found my daughter, thank you so much." And she goes home with this man who says, "I'm your father." Then we also have the perspective of a teenage boy named Drew. And Drew is being ostracized in his town because his girlfriend has gone missing, and everyone thinks he's the murderer because he was the last one to see her. And he decides that he needs to push this investigation, and that if the police in this town aren't going to do anything to find his girlfriend, he's going to find her himself. So he rallies a couple of his friends together, and they try and hunt down his girlfriend to find out who took her, where she is now, what's going on. Meanwhile, we also have the unnamed FMC's perspective. She finds out that her name is Mary, and her dad shows her photos of them together, and everything seems okay at the start, but things start getting a little weird with Mary and her dad, and this book hurt my soul. I don't think sad is the right word. I was reading this book, and towards the end, I remember I was sitting on the couch, my mum was watching TV, I audibly gasped. I went, and I heard my mum say, what's wrong? And I didn't even pay attention to her. This book, I should have seen it coming. I didn't, but this book really upset me. I would say it put me in a book slump. It didn't, because I was very aware of the fact that I had other books to get through this month, so I couldn't just spend my time hung up on this one. But I'm just gonna say it, man. This book is fucking depressing. It is so fucking sad. So read it if you so choose to. I basically spoilt it for Sarah and Ryan, and I told them what happened and what I thought was going to happen and what actually happened, and they didn't seem as shocked as I did, but maybe that's because I sat there and read this in one sitting, so by the time I got to the part that shocked me, gooped me, gagged me, broke my heart, I was so invested. And I am going to keep that book. I really, really liked it. Next, I picked up Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. Now, initially I had planned to read this directly after, or directly before, Local Woman Missing, but I read the synopses of both books. I realized Local Woman Missing is about a woman and her daughter that go missing. And then I read the back of this book and realized that this is about a kid who goes missing. So I thought, okay, I won't read these books back to back. Like, let's try and separate them just the tiniest bit so the stories are separate and fresh in my mind. This follows our main character, Ethan. He is camping in his backyard with his best friend, Billy, in 1994. And Ethan wakes up on a Saturday morning and Billy's not in the tent anymore. And he goes to Billy's house to see if he's gone home, and he's not there. And there's also a massive tear in the tent from where someone has just taken a knife and sliced the tent, and Billy goes missing, and Billy is never seen again. Then 30 years after the fact, Ethan returns to this little cul-de-sac. Obviously can't escape from the fact that this is the last place he saw Billy, and he tries to solve the mystery. Now, if you have read Local Woman Missing and you want to read Middle of the Night, or if you've read Middle of the Night and want to read Local Woman Missing, you're probably going to want to skip the next couple of minutes of this review. I will leave a spoiler warning somewhere on the screen. I'm not going to be too specific about it, but you know how when I was talking about Local Woman Missing, I said I was going to refer back to Local Woman Missing? This is this moment. So if you don't want any kind of spoilers about any similarities between the books, I would be muting the video now. So, Local Woman Missing. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, at the time I was like, holy shit, that was a really good ending, that was a really good resolution, that was a really good tie up to the mystery, tie up all the loose ends. And then the exact same thing happened in Middle of the Night. I'm not exaggerating. Like, the exact scenario that led to the child being disappeared. So, I will say, there are some slight differences. Obviously, Middle of the Night just follows Billy's disappearance. Local Woman Missing follows Shelby, and then later on, a woman and her child. But the way that Shelby goes missing and the way Billy goes missing, fucking identical. I don't know how to explain the way I feel about both books now. I feel like surely one of them copied the other. Alternatively, neither of these authors is very original, and that saddens me because I liked Local Woman Missing so much once I finished it, and then only to read a very fucking similar resolution in Riley Sager. It disappointed me. It actually made me lose enjoyment for both of the books. Maybe it's just my bad luck that I read them so close to each other, like within the same month. Maybe if I had read Local Woman Missing 2 years ago and then read Middle of the Night today, it wouldn't have affected me and disappointed me so much. But the fact that I read them so close together, like, I don't think this has ever happened to me in all of my years of reading. I don't think I've ever read 2 thrillers in such close proximity that have such a fucking identical ending. I still enjoyed Middle of the Night, but I just don't know how I feel thinking back to it. While I was reading it, I really enjoyed it, but now looking back on it, it's kind of fucking with my head a little bit, I'll be honest with you. I actually said to Sarah, I'm like, I don't know if I would recommend it, because as well as the fact of everything I've just mentioned, this is very different than Riley Sager's other work, you know? His other books are usually a little bit campy. They are usually wild and outlandish and have really fun, interesting characters. This book is not that. This book is very reflective, very sad, full of grief and mourning, and a 40-something-year-old guy who cannot move on from this one thing that happened in his childhood. It's a very different vibe. I still enjoyed it, but I don't think people picking up a Riley Sager book for the Riley Sager experience are going to enjoy this as much as his other books. And if anyone out there watching this video has read both of those books, please reach out to me, because I need to discuss this rage and this frustration with someone else. Next, we have got At Home with the Horrors by Sammy Scott. This book is highly rated by all the people I follow on Goodreads, right? A lot of people are calling this their newest favorite horror short story collection. I am not one of those people. I am tempted to unhaul this book. I actually might. Should I? Technically, all of these short stories are set in a house or a home at some point. I don't necessarily think At Home with the Horrors is a great summary of the collection. These again felt very creepypasta. They felt very Reddit. They felt very r/no sleep. And that's fine, I suppose. I didn't enjoy them. I'm going to be honest. Didn't enjoy this collection. I liked a couple of the stories. Rebirth was probably my favorite. It was very interesting. It was a conversation between a father and son, and the father talking about how the government experimented with injections that basically pause aging, how they eventually figured out a way to reverse aging. A very interesting story. Did enjoy it. Hated the ending. I also liked Scared Mary, which follows a woman whose husband has decided to become a prank YouTuber, and she is the attack of his pranks, and she's kind of fucking over it, and things get kind of weird and creepy towards the end. Again, I didn't really love the ending, thought it was going to go somewhere different. It didn't. But my biggest problem with this fucking short story collection being the fucking emphasis here, is the final story, Emil Bones. This short story was 120 pages long. That is a novella. That could be published as its own fucking book. Thank God it wasn't, but like, could have been. I don't even want to explain to you what the plot of this story is. I just liked it. I didn't like this story. It felt like The Babadook if The Babadook was shitter than I already think it is. I didn't enjoy The Babadook. I liked this story even less than The Babadook, which is saying something. This short story follows a stupid woman whose stupid name I don't know, nor do I care to remember. What I remember most about this short story is the woman in this book. The woman in this story is insufferable. And you know why she's insufferable?
Hey dudes, this is Editing Steph here, and I just thought you should know I'm about to rant about a very specific element of this short story for quite some time, so buckle in or skip ahead and enjoy the rant.
Because she's decided that she's too good for romance books. That pissed me off. I'm just gonna read to you. I highlighted guys, because I got to the point of like, why is she harping on about fucking romance books so much if she hates them? It pissed me off. I know I'm harping on about a book that I hate right now. I understand the hypocrisy. Let me just read out some of these fucking highlighted sentences for you. She's in her bedroom at this point, which is very important for context. I grabbed another book, a stupid romance novel that was offensive to me both as a woman and as a book reader, but was as pleasantly distracting and unhealthy as a bar of chocolate, and read. Okay? I would like you just to remember that this is the book that she owns. She's in her house. Either she owns it or she's borrowed it from a library. She's choosing to pick it up, and she really hates romances because they're offensive to her both as a woman and as a book reader. Okay, let's keep going. So, she's met a guy, and she's told him that she's a writer. She's actually a librarian, but she's calling herself a writer. Fine. He says, good for you. What kind of stories? Romances? She says, nah. Who reads that junk? You apparently. Like, you read that type of shit apparently. You just... Next time we have the little thing. She says, I picked up my stupid romance novel. And in brackets, in italics, who reads that junk? And I'm like, is she mentally calling back to herself? Or is she having a new thought and isn't referencing her past conversation? Okay, I'm gonna call her Helen. I think her name's Helena. I'm gonna call her Helen. I don't know if that's the last one. Oh, there is one more, right? She's at the park, right? With her son, okay? She's sitting on a bench. I had brought along a book to read. Not the romance novel, but something respectable to be seen with in public. Like, so at that point I realized, okay, so Tammy Scott is just a really lazy author, which I already knew at this point. Like, I've read the entire collection at this point, sans this one story. Already knew, lazy writing, it's fine. But I just couldn't let it go. All that is to say, I'm going to be taking a photo of all the parts I've highlighted, and then this book is getting on hold, so some other poor unfortunate soul can read it. It will not be me. We've got 3 books to go, guys. Next we have His and Hers by Alice Feeney. Sarah, once again, this was not a Sarah recommendation. Sarah really wants me to read Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney because I had it on Audible. She stole it from my Audible. All is well. And I wanted to read Daisy Darker, but I have this little stupid part of my brain that's like, but you have to read all the books in chronological order. You can't read an author's works out of order. So I decided I'm gonna have to get through all of Alice Feeney's books to get to Daisy Darker. So I read His and Hers. This started in a weird place. So this book starts kind of like how you'd expect any book to start. We have our main character, our female main character, Anna. We are following her through her average day at work. Then we skip to her ex-husband's perspective. His name is Jack. He's a detective, and kind of like how he goes about his normal day. We do get random chapters interspersed throughout the book from an anonymous, non-gendered person who's obviously the villain of the story. And the book really starts up when Jack is called to be part of a case. There is a dead woman found in the town he lives in who has connections to both Anna and Jack. Anna, the news reporter, comes and ends up getting a lot more invested and involved in the case than she wants to, and we find out that specific women are being picked off one by one. I really liked this book, like straight up. I always love an Alice Feeney book. I gave it 4.5 stars, but if I'm being critical, I didn't really like the way it started. It was a very slow start that we're following Anna through an average day at work, and we're following Jack and his perspective, not gonna lie, a little bit boring at the start, and it's just kind of like dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum, murder, dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum, another murder. I just think it should have started with a bit more of a punch, but I still enjoyed it. Love Alice Feeney. It wasn't super unpredictable. Like, it got towards the end of the book and I'm like, look, there's a very specific group of characters that could be the villain. We're getting very close to the end of the book. Like, it's going to be someone out of this particular group of characters. But I enjoyed it. It was still fun. It was good times. Then I decided to pick up My Vampire Plus One by Jenna Levine. This is the sequel to My Vampire is a Roommate, and my enjoyment of this book is the reason I will not be unhauling the first book, because I loved this book. This book follows Frederick's best friend, Reggie, and Cassie's best friend's sister, Amelia. They bump into each other on the street. It's a bit of a weird first meeting, and a couple of days later, when Amelia is trying to find a fake date to take to her cousin's wedding, she locks eyes with Reggie, and she's like, oh my god, it's that weirdo that bumped into me the other day. I suppose he owes me a favor. And she basically asks him to be her fake boyfriend and come to her cousin's wedding, and he agrees. And Reggie is the sweetest little cinnamon roll. I loved Reggie with my entire heart. Amelia, she was kind of a bitch, but she came around by the end, so I liked her. This book, 4.5 stars. I loved it leaps and bounds more than My Roommate is a Vampire. Maybe it's because I went into this knowing it was going to be a little bit campy, but I just think Reggie was such a more likable character than Frederick. I think the dynamic between Reggie and Amelia was 10 times better than that of Cassie and Frederick. So this is the superior book if you are going to read either book. Do I think you could skip the first one? I think you probably could, actually. I think you probably could. I like reading books in order so I have context, but if you're one of those people who can skip a connected standalone, probably do it, because this was just so much better. So I'm going to be keeping both books. That's what's going to have to happen. And then we have the last book of the month, and I ranted so long about Sammy Scott that this video is... we need to be done. We need to be done. The last book I read in October was Incidents Around the House by Josh Mellerman. This book, popping off everywhere. Not gonna lie, hasn't been released in Australia yet. Don't know why it's taking so long for this book to be released. This is an import from the US. It cost me 40 Australian dollars to get it shipped here, because it is just unavailable in Australia. Can't find it anywhere. So I started and finished reading this last night. If you guys haven't heard, I'm sure most of you have by now, this follows and is from the perspective of an 8-year-old girl named Bella. She lives with her mummy. She lives with her daddo. I've never heard anyone call their dad daddo, but she does. But at nighttime, a creature comes out of her closet, known as Other Mummy. And Other Mummy asks Amelia fun questions like, can I go inside your heart? Will you let me inside your heart? And Bella, pretty bright kid, goes, no, that's probably not a good idea. And at first, Other Mummy is confined to Bella's closet, but then she's only confined to Bella's bedroom, and then she's only confined to the house, and things progressively get a little bit more hectic as the book goes on. I don't want to spoil it too much, but basically what we start off by thinking is just Bella's problem becomes a whole family problem. I enjoyed this book. I didn't love it. It's not a new favorite horror, but I'm going to keep it because I enjoyed it. I've heard so many people talk shit about the ending of this book, and I'm just going to say the ending of this book, it was refreshing. I'm not going to spoil it, but feel like a lot of horrors and thrillers kind of end in the same sort of way, same sort of vibe. This book didn't do that. First of all, we didn't have an epilogue. How refreshing, because every fucking book I read this month has had an epilogue. Didn't have an epilogue. It just kind of ended, and it was so lovely. It was refreshing. It was new. It definitely gave me a mix of maybe Coraline for sure, and maybe Imaginary. It's probably a mix of both those movies to me. I really enjoyed this. I don't know if I'd recommend it to everyone, but it was just a big game of cat and mouse, and I really enjoyed it. So it was a nice way to end off the month. Now, I don't want to get too much into it because sorry, I just need to Creep It Real needs to just like be a bit more prominent, because I think I wore this last Spooktober as well. Obviously, I need to buy more clothes. Books is good for the brain. I am not excited to edit this video. I also think I may need to poop because my bowels, not normal. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I'm gonna have, actually, this might sound sarcastic, but genuinely I am so excited that I get to put all of these books back onto my shelves, because they've been sitting in piles beside my bed throughout the month of October. So I'm gonna have some room on my floor again. I'm excited. I'm happy this video was filmed. I will see you guys later. Bye.